I never imagined that a gift, something given from love and sacrifice, could become a battleground. My name is Carol. I'm in my late 50s, and for most of my adult life, I was a single mother. I raised my daughter, Ella, entirely on my own after her father left when she was 2. Those early years weren't easy. I worked 2 jobs, skipped meals, and poured every ounce of energy I had into giving Ella a stable home. We moved from small apartment to small apartment, never complaining. Ella was a bright, sweet girl, always eager to help. I used to come home from my night shift and find she'd made us both peanut butter sandwiches and lined up her stuffed animals to guard the kitchen. That girl was my world. I made a promise to myself early on that I would never remarry, not because I didn't believe in love, but because I didn't want to take any focus away from raising my daughter. She was everything. My reason, my anchor. Over time, things improved. I got a better job working in real estate administration. I slowly began saving not just for our bills or emergencies, but for something bigger, a home. When Ella was in high school, I surprised her with a visit to a small property by the sea. It was an older villa, charming but in need of love. We both fell in love with it. Over the years, I poured my heart and savings into that house, fixing it up room by room, painting it ourselves, planting flowers in the front. It became our haven. When Ella went off to college, I gave her the upstairs guest room as her own space whenever she visited, and when she graduated and got her first job, she'd return there on weekends to breathe again. Then she met Jake. He was polite, charming, and came from a big family. At first, I was thrilled. He made Ella laugh, brought her flowers, and seemed genuinely interested in our life. They dated for 2 years before marrying. I gifted them the villa as a wedding present, no mortgage, no expectations, just a gift from mother to daughter. I had moved into a small condo by then and told Ella that the house was now hers. She cried when I handed her the deed, and I remember hugging her tightly and whispering, "This house is your sanctuary. Use it well." For the first few months, everything was perfect. They painted one of the bedrooms, rearranged furniture, invited me over for dinner once a week. Jake still seemed kind, still looked at Ella with that same admiration. Then his family began to appear. At first, it was innocent enough. His mother, Linda, came to visit for a few days. She brought casseroles and commented on the curtains. I didn't mind. After all, family is family. But the days turned into weeks. Linda stayed. Then Jake's younger brother, Tyler, arrived just crashing for a bit while job hunting. A week later, Jake's cousin Vicky showed up, suitcase in hand. I asked Ella how long they were staying. She hesitated. "I'm not sure," she said. "Jake thinks it's just temporary." I saw the worry in her eyes. Within a month, the villa no longer felt like Ella's. Tyler played loud music at night. Vicky borrowed Ella's clothes without asking. Linda began organizing the kitchen, throwing out spices she didn't recognize, and talking about how a real home should be run. I watched my daughter shrink. Ella, once vibrant and confident, now asked permission to use her own kitchen. She tiptoed around her own home. When I visited, Linda made passive-aggressive comments about how it's so generous for in-laws to be welcomed, even when the house was a gift. That word gift stung. It was my gift. To Ella, and now it was being slowly stolen. Every time I visited the villa, it felt less like Ella's home and more like a boarding house run by Linda. The walls were repainted a beige I knew Ella hated. Her favorite chair was now in the garage because it didn't match. Her books were boxed up to make space for the baby photos and holiday decorations Linda brought from her own attic. It was like watching my daughter be erased. Ella tried to smile through it. She told me, "It's temporary. They're just trying to help. Jake says it's family." But her eyes told a different story. They looked tired, diminished. She was quieter, Less Ella. One afternoon, I stopped by unannounced with a pie. Linda answered the door. She looked surprised, then plastered on a smile. "Oh, Carol, how sweet. We didn't expect company. I just wanted to drop this off. Is Ella home?" "She's lying down. She's been a bit overwhelmed lately. All this new responsibility. You know, being a wife." She said the word wife like it came with a manual my daughter hadn't read. "I'll just say hello quickly," I said, stepping past her before she could stop me. I found Ella in the guest room, her old room, sitting on the bed with her knees pulled up. She smiled when she saw me, but her shoulders didn't relax. I sat beside her. "You okay, baby?" She nodded. "Too quickly. They're just a lot. I don't want to make waves." "You're not making waves by asking for respect." She looked down. "I don't want Jake to think I'm not trying. He says I should be more understanding." I clenched my fists. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the years I spent building that house into a safe place, and now it was being turned into something else entirely. Not a home, a territory. Over the next few weeks, things escalated. Tyler hosted a poker night that went until 3 Oz. Moon. Ella found beer spilled on the couch and ashes in the kitchen sink. When she mentioned it to Jake, he said, "It's just once in a while. Let him enjoy himself." Vicky started borrowing Ella's jewelry. When Ella asked her to please ask first, Vicky laughed and said, "We're family. What's mine is yours." Right. Linda began rearranging things. Ella's wedding china was packed away because it's too delicate to use. Her plants were thrown out because they attract bugs. Even her skincare products were moved to a basket under the sink because Jake doesn't like clutter. It wasn't subtle. It was a takeover. And Jake, he was silent. Worse, he defended them. "They mean well," he kept saying. "Why are you being so sensitive?" One afternoon, Ella called me. Her voice was shaking. "Mom," she whispered, "I feel like a guest in my own house." That was the moment I decided. I wasn't going to be polite anymore. From that moment on, I became intentional. I began visiting the villa more frequently, sometimes with groceries, sometimes just to drop something off, but always to see for myself how things were unfolding. Ella was always gracious. Linda, less so. I didn't realize we'd be entertaining so much this week. She'd comment, with a tight smile. Once, she even said, "Carol, you don't have to feel responsible for Ella anymore. She has us now." Us. As if I had been replaced. I didn't respond. But I noticed Ella flinch, and that was enough to tell me everything. One day, I arrived to find Linda reorganizing the pantry. "Oh," she said brightly, "I was just clearing out expired items. Some of these are from when you owned the place." I kept my voice even. "I didn't realize you were managing the food inventory now." She laughed. "Well, someone has to. Ella's been so overwhelmed." I turned to my daughter. "Is that true?" Ella looked at me, then at Linda. I guess I've just been tired." Linda cut in. "It's a lot, being a new wife." I nodded slowly. "And hosting an entire extended family in your home might have something to do with that." Linda's smile faded. After that, things became more strained. Tyler gave me side glances when I walked in. Vicky stopped saying hello altogether. Jake was cordial but distant. One evening, I sat with Ella in the backyard. "I need to ask you something," I said gently. "Do you feel safe? Respected?" She hesitated. "They're not bad people." "That's not what I asked." She looked down. "No, I don't feel like I have a say." I reached for her hand. "You don't need permission to live freely in your own home. And you definitely don't need permission to speak up." She nodded, eyes wet. I knew then she was close to breaking, but she wasn't ready yet. I could feel it. So I waited. Then, one afternoon, the moment came. I arrived early. catching Linda mid-conversation with one of her friends on speakerphone. She didn't know I had entered the kitchen. "Oh, I'm basically running the house now," she said. Carol was nice, but clearly old-fashioned. No wonder Ella is so passive. My hands tightened around the grocery bag I was carrying. She looked up, startled. I placed the bag on the counter calmly. "Afternoon, Linda." She fumbled with her phone. "Oh, I didn't hear you come in." "No," I said. "You were busy." Ella entered the kitchen at that moment, sensing something was off. "Everything okay?" I turned to her. "Darling, I think it's time we had a conversation." We sat at the kitchen table. I poured tea for both of us, and Ella looked like she hadn't breathed properly in days. "Sweetheart," I began gently, "I know you love Jake, and I know you've tried to be respectful to his family, but I need to say this clearly." She nodded slowly, her hands wrapped tightly around her mug. "This house is yours, legally, emotionally, spiritually. It was my gift to you, not to Jake, not to his mother, not to his brother or cousin." Ella blinked. Her lips trembled. "I know," she whispered, "but if I ask them to leave, Jake will be furious." I leaned in. "And if you don't, what happens to you?" She said nothing, just stared down at the tea as if it held an answer. "I'm not telling you what to do," I added, "but I won't stand by and watch you disappear inside your own home." She gave me a weak smile. That weekend, Linda hosted a family barbecue at the villa without asking Ella. I was invited. Of course, she probably hoped I'd see how harmonious things were, but harmony isn't built on silence. As we sat outside, plates balanced on our laps, Linda said loudly, "Isn't it wonderful how this house brings everyone together? It's like it was meant to be a family home." I set down my fork. "Actually," I said clearly, "it was meant to be Ella's home." Silence. Jake glanced up, then quickly looked away. Linda chuckled. Of course. But we're all family now. Family doesn't erase boundaries," I said. She blinked. "Well, boundaries can be flexible, not when they compromise someone's peace." Linda's smile froze. Tyler cleared his throat and changed the subject. But the tension was there, like a storm cloud waiting. Later that night, Ella texted me, "Thank you for saying something. I didn't have the words." I replied, "You don't always need words. Sometimes presence is enough." Over the next week, Ella started making small changes. She moved her books back to the living room. She put her favorite chair in the sunroom. She locked her jewelry drawer. Vicky complained. Jake rolled his eyes. But Ella didn't stop, and I could feel her spine straightening. One morning, Linda found me in the garden when I came by to visit. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're very protective of your daughter." "I am, she said, brushing imaginary dirt from her skirt. "Some people might say you're interfering. Some people confuse interference with support." Her eyes narrowed. "She's not a child." "No, she's a woman, and I won't let her be treated like a guest in her own house." Linda's voice sharpened. "This is our family's home now." I looked her straight in the eyes. "No, it's Ella's home, given to her, in her name, and I suggest you start acting like you remember that." She scoffed and walked away, but something in her step faltered. She knew. She just didn't want to admit it. I returned to the villa 2 days later, this time with a folder in my bag, not just to visit, to make a point. Linda was in the living room, reading a magazine. She barely glanced up. "Oh, Carol, you again?" I ignored the tone. "Is Ella home?" "She's out running errands," Linda said. "She left a note, but I'm sure she'll be thrilled you stopped by." I sat on the sofa opposite her. "I need to talk to you." Linda set her magazine down. "About what?" "This house, this arrangement," she sighed. "Carol, I know this transition has been hard for you, but Ella is building a life now with us. I'm just here to support her. Support doesn't look like taking over her space. It doesn't sound like criticizing her cooking, her choices, her furniture. Linda narrowed her eyes. I don't think you understand how young couples work. I understand manipulation when I see it. Her mouth tightened. She's my daughter. She's my daughter too now. Linda shot back. No, she's your son's wife. That's not the same. Linda stood up. I don't have time for this. I reached into my bag and pulled out a copy of the deed. This is in Ella's name only. No co-signed. No shared ownership. This was a gift from me to her legally and completely. She froze. I know you've tried to act like this is your family estate, but it's not. And if you continue to treat her like a guest in her own home, I will take further steps. Linda scoffed. You're threatening me. I'm setting boundaries. Something Ella is learning to do. Before she could respond, the front door opened. Ella walked in, surprised to see us both standing. What's going on? I turned to her. Sweetheart, I've just reminded Linda that this house is yours, that you have the right to say who stays and who doesn't. Ella looked between us. Her face flushed. Linda jumped in. We were just chatting. I was explaining how much we've invested emotionally in making this a home. Ella's voice was quiet, but firm. It already was a home. Before anyone moved in, Linda blinked. I saw something shift in Ella then. Not anger. Resolve. Jake came downstairs at that moment, yawning. What's going on? Ella turned to him. I want to talk. Now. Yes. Now. They went upstairs. Linda sat back down, arms crossed. You've turned her against us. No, I said calmly. You did that yourself. 10 minutes later, Ella returned, Jake behind her, looking shell-shocked. She looked at Linda. I need you to leave. All of you. Linda's mouth opened. I'm giving you a week. Jake started to speak, but Ella held up a hand. No debates. This is final. And that was it. They left within the week. The house was quiet. Too quiet. After Linda, Tyler, and Vicky moved out, the energy in the villa shifted completely. It wasn't chaos anymore, but it wasn't peace yet either. It was the stillness that follows a storm. Ella walked from room to room, trying to reclaim the space, but everywhere she turned, there were reminders of what had been. A chair that still smelled faintly of Vicky's perfume, a dent in the wall from Tyler's impromptu dart game, a spice rack rearranged in a way Ella never liked. Jake was distant. He hadn't spoken much since the day she asked his family to leave. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just withdrew, and that was almost worse. They ate dinner in silence. He scrolled on his phone. She pushed food around on her plate. Eventually, he began sleeping in the guest room. Carol visited every other day. She never asked questions, never pushed. Instead, she cooked, brought candles, helped Ella move furniture back where it belonged. Little things matter, Carol said one afternoon as they wiped down the baseboards. They remind you the space is yours. Ella nodded. They repainted the hallway together, hung photos that had been packed away. One morning, Carol found Ella sitting on the kitchen floor, holding a mug of cold tea. Do you regret it? Ella asked. Carol sat beside her. No, but Jake. He's barely looked at me. That's not your fault. He says I embarrassed him. Carol's voice was calm. By standing up for yourself. Ella leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. I didn't think it would feel this lonely. I know, Carol whispered. But sometimes, loneliness is the space where you remember who you are. Over the next few weeks, Ella began to breathe easier. She played music again while cooking, started journaling before bed, even took up yoga, following YouTube videos in the living room. Jake came and went. He wasn't cruel, just absent. When she asked him how work was, he answered with one word. When she said she missed him, he said, I just need time. Carol never criticized him. But one night, As they washed dishes, she said, "Love that can't survive. A boundary wasn't love. It was convenience." Ella didn't respond. But later, she wrote the quote on a sticky note and put it on her mirror. Some mornings, she'd read it 3 times before brushing her teeth. Then one day, Jake packed a small bag. "I'm going to stay with a friend for a bit," he said. Ella nodded. He didn't say when he'd be back. She didn't ask. After the door closed, she stood in the hallway for a long time. Then she exhaled. A long, shaky breath. Later that evening, Carol stopped by with soup and fresh bread. They sat in the dining room, eating slowly. Ella looked around. The tablecloth was hers again. The scent in the air was rosemary, not Tyler's cologne. The kitchen counters were clear. It was her house again, really hers. And for the first time in a long time, she felt safe. The days passed more softly than Ella expected. She thought the silence would feel heavy. Instead, it felt clean. The house didn't echo anymore. It breathed. She cleaned out the guest room Jake had used, folded the sheets, donated the things he left behind. Old chargers, a basketball he hadn't touched in months, socks with holes. Each drawer she emptied felt like removing weight from her chest. She didn't cry, not because she didn't care, but because it didn't hurt the same way anymore. Carol came over every Sunday with fresh flowers. "I like how the light hits this room now," she said once. Standing in the hallway, Ella smiled. It never looked this warm before. She began cooking again. Not big meals, simple things. Eggs on toast with basil from her garden. Soup that simmered for hours. She set the table for one and lit a candle anyway. Because she could. Jake texted sometimes. Short messages. "Hope you're okay. Let me know if you need anything." Ella responded politely. "Thanks. I'm doing okay." She didn't block him, but she didn't wait on his replies either. Instead, she journaled more, took walks after dinner, read books she'd bought months ago and never touched. One afternoon, she found a note Carol had slipped into her mailbox. It said, "The strongest people aren't the ones who win. They're the ones who don't give up when they lose." Ella kept it on her nightstand. When Jake finally asked if they could talk, she said yes. They met at a quiet cafe near the park. He looked tired, older. Somehow, they sipped coffee for a while before he spoke. "I didn't realize how much they'd taken over." Ella nodded. "I should have stopped it sooner," he added. She didn't answer right away. "Why didn't you?" Jake looked down. "I didn't want to be the bad guy. They're my family, and I'm not." He blinked. Ella's voice was calm. "You let them take from me. My space. My peace. You watched. I thought you were okay. I told you I wasn't." He reached for her hand. "I want to come back." She pulled away gently. "I'm not saying no, but I'm not saying yes either." Jake looked stunned. "I'm not punishing you," she continued. "I just need to know that you see me, that you hear me." "I do now." "Then prove it. Not with flowers, with actions." He nodded. They parted with a hug. Nothing decided, but something shifted. Ella returned home and sat in the sunroom. The late afternoon light made patterns on the floor. She felt proud, not because everything was fixed, but because she hadn't folded. She had stayed, in her house, in her truth. Jake started showing up more often after their coffee meeting. He brought takeout, fixed the squeaky hinge on the back door, offered to repaint the bathroom. Ella watched him carefully, not out of suspicion, but curiosity. He was trying. She could see that. But she also saw something else. He was still waiting for her to become the version of herself he was used to. The accommodating one, the soft-spoken one who never said no. She wasn't angry at him, not anymore, but she wasn't going backward either. One evening, Jake arrived with 2 bags of groceries. "I thought I could cook tonight," he said. Ella raised an eyebrow. "You cook?" He laughed. "I've been practicing." He made pasta, burned the garlic bread, dropped a spoon in the sauce, and looked so genuinely flustered that Ella had to laugh. It was easy, comfortable, but when he reached for her hand across the table, she pulled back slightly. He noticed, said nothing. After dinner, he offered to wash the dishes. She let him. Carol called later that night. How was dinner? Fine. Just fine. Ella hesitated. He's trying, and I don't know if it's enough. Carol's voice was steady. Trying is good, but trying isn't changing. Ella sat on the couch, staring at the spot where Jake had just sat. I keep wondering if I owe him a chance. You owe yourself peace. That's all. Ella thanked her, hung up, and sat there for a long time. The next day, Jake came by again, brought flowers. Ella accepted them, placed them in a vase, and said nothing more. He stayed for an hour, helped her organize books, then left. When the door closed, she exhaled, not in sadness, in clarity. That night, she journaled. He's not a bad man, but I am not the same woman. Jake texted her a few days later. Want to go for a drive? Just us. She said no. Later, he called. Ella, I don't know what else to do. You don't have to do anything. I don't want to lose you. She closed her eyes. I think you already did. You just didn't notice. Silence. Then he said, I wish things were like before. I don't. More silence. I still love you, he said. I'm learning to love myself, she replied. That was the last time they spoke for a while. Carol came over that weekend, brought muffins and a puzzle. They sat in the sunroom, piecing together the sky. You okay? Carol asked. Ella nodded. It hurts less than I thought it would. That's how healing sneaks in, Carol said, placing a corner piece. Quiet, patient. Ella looked around the room, her life. She smiled. I think I'm going to be okay. And she really was. The weeks that followed were quiet, but not empty. Ella began waking earlier, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She liked the way the light filtered through the kitchen window at 6:30 a.m. She'd sip her coffee slowly, barefoot on the cold tile floor, and just be. She added new plants to the sunroom, painted the porch railings herself, started baking again, just for fun. She didn't invite anyone over, didn't post pictures. She wasn't performing happiness. She was living it. Carol still came by often, but less out of worry and more out of habit. They'd do crosswords, argue about which tea tasted better, sit in silence for long stretches and not feel the need to fill it. You seem lighter, Carol said once, as they trimmed basil in the garden. Ella smiled. I think I am. Sometimes Jake would text. She didn't ignore him, but she didn't engage either. He once wrote, You're different now. She typed and deleted 3 different responses before settling on yes. She didn't owe him an explanation. One evening, Ella walked past a boutique downtown and saw her reflection in the window. She stopped, not to fix her hair, not to check her outfit, but to really see herself. She looked calm, not radiant, not striking, just whole. The next morning, she wrote in her journal, I don't miss who I was. I mourned her, but I like who I am now better. She started volunteering at a local shelter twice a week, not because she needed distraction, but because she wanted to give back, to pour into something that wasn't tied to her pain. At the shelter, no one knew her history. No one asked why she was there. They just worked side by side, stacking food, folding blankets, laughing over bad coffee. It felt good. On her birthday, Carol brought over a lemon cake. Ella made pasta and set the table for 2. No big celebration. Just the way she wanted it. Carol raised her glass. To a new chapter. Ella clinked hers. To writing it myself. After dinner, they sat on the porch, watched the sky shift from pink to deep blue, Do you think you'll date again? Carol asked gently. Ella laughed. Eventually. Maybe. Not in a rush. Not at all. Carol smiled. I'm proud of you. Ella looked at her mother, the woman who had taught her how to survive, how to rebuild, how to stay soft without staying silent. Thanks, Mom, for everything. That night, as she crawled into bed, Ella felt something she hadn't in a long time. Not hope, not joy, something quieter, contentment. And it was enough. Ella started writing again, not just journaling, stories, little snapshots of memory turned into fiction. She wrote about a woman who found a key in her grandmother's sewing box, about a girl who talked to birds, about an old house that whispered secrets through the floorboards. They weren't polished, some didn't have endings, but they were hers. She set a goal, write for 20 minutes each morning. No pressure, no audience, just words. Sometimes she shared them with Carol, who read them slowly and smiled. You always had a way with sentences, Carol said one day. Even when you were 10, your letters to Santa were poetic. Ella laughed. Maybe I just wanted better presents. They laughed together. Ella began walking different routes around the neighborhood. She took photos of broken fences and blooming vines, started noticing how light hit brick walls differently at 5 Paths de Pum. She joined a local book club, didn't mention Jake, didn't mention the villa, just said, I'm Ella, and that was enough. One night, after reading a short story aloud, someone asked, Is that about you? Ella paused, then said, It's about becoming me. At home, she rearranged the living room again, not because she needed change, but because she liked having a say. Every shift in a cushion or shelf felt like a declaration. This is my space. One afternoon, Carol brought over a plant. It's called a peace lily, she said, placing it on the kitchen table. Ella smiled. How fitting. Needs some sunlight. Not too much. A little care, like us. They shared tea, talked about nothing urgent. Then Carol said, You seem anchored. Ella tilted her head. I feel grounded, like I'm no longer waiting for the next thing to shake me. That night, Ella wrote, Maybe healing isn't about returning to who you were. Maybe it's about letting that version rest and making space for who you are now. She lit a candle, played a record, sat by the window and watched the world move without needing to chase it. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't seeking anything. She was simply here. Ella submitted one of her short stories to a local literary magazine. She didn't tell anyone, not even Carol. It wasn't about recognition. It was about courage. 2 weeks later, she received an email. We loved your piece. It said, Would you consider contributing again? She stared at the screen, then smiled. Carol noticed the shift. You seem taller, she said one afternoon. Ella laughed. I think I'm just standing straighter. Carol placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Whatever it is, keep doing it. Ella wrote more. Stories about resilience, quiet strength, the beauty of choosing peace over performance. She still volunteered, still took her morning walks. But now, she carried a notebook everywhere. Ideas came unexpectedly in line at the market, during laundry. While stirring soup, she didn't try to impress anyone. She just told the truth. One day, the magazine asked her to read her work at a community event. She almost declined, but Carol raised an eyebrow. You've spoken truth in silence long enough. Maybe it's time others heard it out loud. Ella agreed. The night of the event, she wore a simple navy dress, no makeup, just herself. She stood at the podium, hands slightly shaking. Then she began. Her voice was soft at first, but steady. She read about fear, about losing yourself slowly, piece by piece, then finding your way back, word by word. When she finished, there was a pause, then quiet applause, no standing ovation, but no awkward silence either. Afterward, a woman approached her. "I don't know your full story," she said, "but I saw myself in your words." Ella smiled. "Then I wrote them for both of us." She walked home that night under a sky full of stars, not searching for constellations, just letting the light fall where it wanted. Carol was waiting with warm tea. "Well," Ella sat beside her. "I think I did okay." Carol nodded. "You did more than okay. You showed up." Ella sipped her tea. That phrase lingered. "You showed up." She wrote it down later in her journal. "I showed up. For myself. That counts." And it did. It counted more than she'd ever realized. The letter came on a Tuesday. It was from a small press Ella had submitted a manuscript to quietly, cautiously. "We loved your voice," the letter said. "We'd love to talk about next steps." Ella read the lines 3 times, then set it down and stared out the window. Not in disbelief, in stillness. Carol stopped by later with groceries. Ella handed her the letter. Carol read it, then smiled. "You're ready," she said simply. "I think so," Ella whispered. She spent the next few weeks editing, not obsessively, not to chase perfection, just to make the words feel more honest. She added pages, took others out, changed an ending, let silence stay where it needed to. Sometimes she cried while writing, not from sadness, from release. Carol brought over soup and kept quiet company. "I'm not writing about pain," Ella said once. "I'm writing about what's beyond it. That's called growth," Carol replied, handing her a cup of tea. When she sent in the final draft, she didn't celebrate. She lit a candle, acknowledged the moment. That was enough. Months passed. The publisher emailed with cover mock-ups. Ella chose the simplest one, A Quiet Path Through Trees. No title yet, but she had time. During that season, she kept volunteering, kept walking, kept being. Jake texted once, "I saw your name in a newsletter. Congratulations." She replied, "Thank you. Hope you're well." That was all. It felt complete. One afternoon, she sat on her porch, manuscript in hand. Carol joined her. "Do you remember," Carol began, "when you first moved into this house?" Ella nodded. "You were so full of plans. Garden beds, a reading nook, dinner parties." Ella smiled. "I thought happiness had to be busy." Carol took her hand. "You learned that peace can be quiet." Ella held the manuscript to her chest. "I think this book is more than my story." Carol nodded. "It's your voice." And that was it. Ella had found it. Her voice. And she wasn't afraid to use it anymore. Ella stood in front of the bookstore mirror, adjusting the collar of her simple blouse. Her book launch was in 2 hours. She didn't want to wear anything flashy. She didn't want to pretend to be someone she wasn't. This wasn't about image. It was about arrival. Carol met her outside the venue. "Are you nervous?" she asked. Ella shrugged. More like, aware. They walked in together. The space was cozy, rows of folding chairs, a small podium, a table stacked with copies of her book. On the cover, A Quiet Path Through Trees, just like she chose. As people trickled in, Ella recognized a few faces from the book club, the shelter, the cafe where she always wrote. Some were strangers. All held the same expression, quiet anticipation. The host introduced her with kind words, then stepped aside. Ella walked to the podium, heart steady. She looked out at the room, not large, but full. "I didn't write this book to be brave," she began. "I wrote it to be honest." She read an excerpt. Her voice didn't shake. When she finished, someone in the back wiped their eyes. Carol stood, clapping first. Others followed. Afterward, people came forward asking for signatures, sharing thanks. One woman said, "You wrote the things I couldn't say out loud." A man added, "My sister needed this book. I'm buying her a copy." Ella smiled, wrote their names in each cover carefully. Later that evening, She and Carol sat at a quiet diner. "You know," Carol said, stirring her tea, "I always knew you had stories in you. I had to live them first." Ella replied. Carol nodded. "That's what makes them worth reading." Ella sipped her drink. In her purse was a folded napkin, where a teenager had scribbled a thank you note. "You gave me hope," it said. Ella kept it. That night, she sat on her bed, book in her lap, and stared at the dedication page, for anyone learning to listen to their own voice again, and beneath it, a single name, Mom. Ella received an invitation to speak at a literary event in the city. She read the email twice, then closed her laptop, not because she wasn't flattered, but because she didn't feel the need. Carol dropped by later that afternoon. "They want you to travel for a panel." Ella nodded. Carol sipped her tea. "Will you go?" "I don't think so." "Why not?" "I like my life here. It's quiet, real." Carol smiled. "You've stopped needing to prove anything." Ella leaned back. "I think I just stopped needing applause." She kept writing. Not another book. Not yet. But blog posts, notes to herself, little stories that had nothing to do with healing and everything to do with joy. She wrote about a rainy Tuesday when the soup boiled over, about a neighbor's cat that always lounged in her herb garden, about the way sunlight through curtains reminded her of her grandmother's lace. The world, she found, was full of poetry if you slowed down enough. She took a pottery class, wasn't good at it, but loved the mess. The imperfection. One bowl wobbled so much it spilled tea every time. She kept it anyway. Not everything useful needs to be functional. She wrote one day. She saw Jake once. At the market. They exchanged a brief nod. No anger. No action. Just recognition. She didn't tell Carol until a week later. "Ran into him," she said. Carol waited. "He looked fine." "I felt nothing." "That's a kind of closure." Ella smiled. "It really is." She donated her old journals, kept one blank. A symbol, maybe, of stories yet to be written. One morning, she stood in her kitchen, watching the kettle steam. She wasn't thinking of anything profound, just whether she wanted toast or oatmeal. And it struck her. This was the life she once begged the universe for. A quiet kitchen, a calm heart, a room filled only with her own voice, and it was enough. The letter came on a Thursday. Handwritten, Jake's handwriting slightly messy. Familiar. Ella stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. No flowers. No, please. Just this. "I'm sorry. Not for what happened, but for what I didn't see. I never said thank you for everything you gave. If you ever want to meet just to talk, I'd like that." She folded the letter, placed it under a book, then went to make tea. Later that day, she showed it to Carol. "I don't think I want to see him," Ella said. Carol nodded. "You don't have to. I'm not angry," Ella added. "Just finished." But the letter lingered in her thoughts, not painfully, just present. She eventually agreed to meet him on a park bench, under a tree that still had most of its leaves. Jake looked older, softer. He didn't try to hug her, didn't ask for another chance. He just said, "You look well." "I am," Ella replied. They sat in silence for a bit. Then Jake spoke. "I read your book." Ella waited. It hurt, but in the way truth should. She gave a small nod. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For letting me learn too late. Maybe, but still. They didn't make promises. Didn't rewrite the past." Jake stood to leave. "Take care of yourself." Ella. "You too." And that was it. No dramatic goodbye. Just two people who had loved, lost, and learned. She walked home. Didn't cry. Didn't question. Just wrote one line in her journal. "I forgave him. Not to keep him, but to keep myself whole." Carol stopped by that evening. Ella didn't mention the meeting. Didn't need to. Carol looked at her for a moment, then smiled. You look steady. I feel untethered, Ella said. In a good way. In the best way. Ella sat on the porch one evening, watching the wind move through the trees. No music played. No tea steamed in her cup. Just stillness. She closed her eyes. Breathed in. Breathed out. This wasn't the kind of peace you arrive at with fanfare. It was the kind that settled slowly. Carol visited the next morning. They gardened in silence for a while. Then Carol said, "You seem different." Ella smiled. "I feel different. Lighter. More grounded." They paused. Carol brushed dirt from her gloves. "You used to chase peace. Now it looks like it comes to you." Ella didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Maybe I just stopped blocking it." They had lunch together, simple sandwiches, lemon water, talked about nothing urgent. When Carol left, she kissed her daughter's forehead. "I'm proud of you," Ella said. "I know, not out of arrogance, but because she finally believed it." That afternoon, Ella walked to the post office, picked up a letter from a reader who said her words helped her leave a toxic relationship. Ella folded the letter carefully, placed it in a small wooden box labeled "Real Things." Later, she walked past a park, saw children laughing, a couple holding hands, a man reading alone, and she didn't feel envy or longing, just joy. She returned home, lit a candle, wrote, "Today, nothing hurt, and that's a miracle I won't take for granted." Ella sat at her desk one morning. The light poured in through the window, soft and gold. She had no plans that day, no deadlines, no calls to return, just a pen in her hand and a fresh notebook in front of her. She opened to the first page, wrote, "This story doesn't begin with loss. It begins with choosing to stay." She smiled, then kept writing, not because she had something urgent to say, but because words felt like home now. Carol arrived that afternoon. They shared apple slices and cheese, played cards, laughed when Ella forgot the rules again. As the sun dipped low, Carol stood to leave. At the door, she paused. "You okay?" Ella nodded. "More than okay." Carol touched her shoulder. "You've become someone remarkable." Ella shook her head gently. "I just became someone I finally recognize." Carol smiled and left. Ella washed the dishes, fed the neighbor's cat through the fence, lit a candle in the hallway, then sat on the porch, notebook in her lap. She flipped back to the first page, reread that opening line. It felt right, because it was. She looked up, watched the sky shift from lavender to grey-blue. No music, no narration, just wind, breath, and the sound of someone living.